Hello and welcome back, and that is right, as of I think now, UGreen have launched their crowdfunding campaign for this. This is the UGreen IDX 6011 Pro. There is a non-pro version as well, and it's a device that we have talked about here on the channel. We've done a few videos about it, but now, a few months after I've had my hands on it for the first time, I wanted to revisit it for those of you that are considering the campaign. Maybe you're one of those users that went ahead and backed this via that deposit scheme that... 1 minute. Okay, maybe you're one of those people that back this via that deposit scheme, or you're someone that is considering utilising this device in your home or business environment and are considering this crowdfunding. Let's be honest, this is from a brand that had an incredibly successful crowdfunding campaign a few years ago with the NAS Sync series, and today we're going to talk about what has changed on the IDX 6011, the improvements, my experiences of it for the last few months, and ultimately whether this thing deserves your money and your data. But just like we mentioned in the other videos, keep in mind, this is crowdfunding. This is not traditional retail. This is going out on Kickstarter, and therefore it's not the same. And you don't have the same consumer rights as you would with a traditional purchase. So do keep that in mind. Maybe utilize a credit card if you've got enough credit on there in order to get hold of it, because you have better consumer protections on a credit card, or at the very least understand that you are purchasing a device via crowdfunding, and therefore there's no 100% guarantee you're going to get your product, or what you are promised is what you get. Make sure you know that. Ultimately, this is coming from a brand with successful crowdfunding behind them, and they're an established global brand, and therefore I think there is a greater degree of certainty, and the device is real. It's not in their interest to screw people over, but just be aware it is crowdfunding. But let's talk about what we've learned over the last few months. So first off, we've got to discuss the hardware, because realistically, this is probably the area where the least change has occurred since my original videos. Not only because the unit I've got hasn't changed, of course, it may differ from the unit that people get eventually at the end of the campaign, but I don't think it will. But also on top of that, this is a system that we've watched develop at different trade shows for 2 years. Everything from the cooling system right the way down to the AI model itself. But focusing on the hardware, again, in the market value right now, the price tag this is rolling out in, at least in the crowdfunding campaign, it's pretty bloody competitive, notwithstanding that CPU. So again, you've got the option of the Intel Ultra 5 or 7, that's the 125 or 255H processor. We've also got a system here arriving with either 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes of DDR5 8400 mega transfers memory. Now, it is soldered to the board, which is disappointing, but I can imagine there are reasons for that with the economy around RAM right now, and of course SSDs, and we'll come back around to that subject in a moment. But even extending beyond that, this is a system that's arriving with an internal 128 gig SSD, again more on that in a moment. Alongside that, it's dual 10 GBE. The system has an Oculink port. The system has USB 4. The system has SD card 4 speeds there for the front-mounted SD card slot. The system has a PCIe upgrade slot at ×8 speed. And it's got 6 hard drive bays and 2 full-fat Gen 4 SSD bays inside those M.2s. It's hard to argue with this kind of hardware proposition there. Now, we have to add that it ain't all perfect. Alongside that memory being pre-soldered, thank you to user Nicholas, again, more on that later in the video, for lots of you on Reddit and direct email and DMs that I've received messages from. It turns out that internal SSD is soldered. Now, that is something I didn't pick up on. I'm recording this off-site at the moment, more on that in a wee bit, but that 128 gig SSD is pre-soldered. Now, the reason I didn't spot it in my original recording is I didn't want to dismantle the device too much. It was a prototype, but also I needed to make these other videos. I didn't spot that this SSD is soldered. Now, why is that a big deal? In the grand scheme of things, it probably isn't for some, because it's still going to run the job. But it means if that drive fails, you are buggered. So I'm wondering about them introducing a software, and I may mention this when I visit UGreen in China, as I've mentioned online a few times for another upcoming video. I want to ask them about why this is presumably value, but is it possible to have a migration tool in place, or at least a backup tool for someone to reinstate that? Because having that pre-soldered makes it, borderline irreplaceable. And you're probably going to be able to go out of BIOS and reroute from another M.2 slot or even a SATA SSD slot, but that is rather disappointing there. Now, there's not much here that I've not already talked about in the videos that I talked about the software comparing it against other AI NAS devices, and in the original prototype review. But just in case, I do think we have to summarize real quick. This is a full NAS operating system. You have got a file manager, you have got a full control panel there in the back, you have got full storage management where you can create pools, create caching. It doesn't support ZFS or ZFS, but it does support BTRFS. Alongside that, you've got a full and comprehensive application center, which pretty much includes everything. You have got two-factor authentication, multi-user creation, you have got logs, you have got full access to the system for searching files on the fly, you've got access to the full system in terms of creating more bespoke raw storage. So for example, if you want to take advantage of iSCSI, you have that option there to create an iSCSI target and a LUN. On top of that, managing system resources use there in the background. You're going to be able to see a bit of activity there because I'm indexing. We'll come back around to that in a moment. Alongside that, synchronization with cloud storage. Again, creating a storage where you can back up to a third-party cloud volume. And of course, there are options for backup ops or the backup and synchronization tool to back up to other NASs, back up to other UGreen NASs or third-party NASs. You are relying on rsync or synchronizing with cloud spaces if you choose to. And then of course, if you're using the localized tool that you can download for this, for your platform of choice, you can then synchronize a lot easier and more natively there. The security scanner, I still don't like it. I've said before, I don't like it. It only focuses on viruses and malware, and that's great, but I want one that scans for security issues, weak passwords, ports being open, SSH being enabled. That's what I want, and I want to see that in a future update because I do think this is very lacking. You've got Docker support there. Again, installing your own container of choice in that if that application you want to use is not available in the App Center. I'm looking at you, Plex Media Server. Why is that not there? I'm glad you got Jellyfin, but where's Plex? Talking to Jellyfin, it is a native application, but it is a one-click Docker installer there. Voice memos I can't test right now because I'm accessing this remotely, but not much has changed since my original video. And I still love this tool. Notwithstanding, you can upload existing audio files and get them transcribed into text to speech, but you can also create an intelligent flowchart that analyzes the discussion and breaks it down into a product flow. I really recommend you check that out in my previous video. It's one of my favorite apps, and I'm disappointed I'm not able to run it here without the client tool remotely. Scratch that last statement because you can run it remotely. I wasn't able to do that in the original prototype, and they've now enabled this AI service for creating native recordings here on the fly, as you can hear me talking about right now. You can either record and then stop, finish the recording, and then it will transcribe that, but then you can also ask questions about that on the system. Now, you will need to install the latest model in order to do that. Now, you're going to wonder, why have I not enabled that model yet? Well, that is because I've done a full system format of this. I've gone ahead into the system for this video and formatted the system from scratch. So I didn't get round to installing that model because I didn't think I'd be able to show this service remotely. But I do strongly recommend you check that out in my other video because it is a great little tool there. Not only because it allows you to do stuff on the fly during a live meeting via the application, but also if you've got pre-existing audio files, get those scanned and use that transcription. There's now that native VM tool that's always been there, but they've improved it and allowed for a lot more easier deployment on this. And this is, with a lot of these services, notwithstanding the AI stuff, these are things that you can use on other UGreen NAS solutions, but it's nice to know you've got them here, some of which, and we'll come around to that in a moment, have integrated AI services. You've got the encrypted vault that's password protected if you want to make sure certain files and folders can't be accessed. You've got the theater application, which works like Plex, can also be synchronized with the HDMI output that not only allows you to, without entering an API key, by the way, which I really like, you don't have to muck around, it allows it to scrape metadata online when you need it, some of which I've enabled it to happen, some of it I haven't, because you can actually choose what metadata you want to scrape, just like you can in Plex. And all of this is done automatically by just going in and adding where exactly your media lives and then telling the system what to do with it and changing the databases if you choose. Alongside that, you've got things like the audio manager here, allowing you to create streamable files, allowing you to stream to DLNA devices, and there is a dedicated DLNA tool. Again, these are things available from other NAS brands and in the other NAS devices, but some of you may never used a UGreen NAS before, so I do think this summary is important. Then you've got the photo management tool, and again, there are a huge variety of elements of AI built in here. I'm re-indexing as we speak, and I even pointed the database at my multimedia for movies and more, because I wanted to see how it would pick up faces in video files, not just photos. And that's important because the range of integrated recognition here for localized AI edge use is pretty darn good. And then you've got things like text recognition, image recognition, deduplication. So that is obviously when you are going to be having too many of the same file, and you can get it to scan, and then from there remove the duplicates. And again, a lot of this with training models built in is all accessible in the tools area that allows you, for example, to search for duplicate files in different directories, and then from there find them and delete them on the fly. Custom learning to allow you to upload certain files and folders that you want to find particular items for intelligent searches. That's all built in there that you can build on your own on your own terms. And again, you can create your own album, create your own conditional albums. If you create an album here, it's all pretty much what we've seen before, combined with facial recognition, combined with object recognition, locational recognition with geolocational ripping from the photos that may be already built in. Again, the video recognition built in too. Object recognition is still being done right now in the background because I've had to reaction a new index. It's all there. You've got snapshots. You've got pretty much everything you're ever going to need in a modern NAS operating system. I do think there still needs work to be done. I do think some of the bells and whistles are still not quite perfect. Again, there are just bits missing. And if you're looking for the DSM level experience, there's another whole level of AAA applications that aren't here. You know, your active backup, file pinning and things like Synology Drive, but a lot of it's there. But let's dig into the AI services, because that might be one of the main reasons you're buying this. Now, if we're going to talk about the software, I do need to strongly highlight that I've already done a 32-minute video breakdown of the full services on this device, and a lot of it is about that AI. I really dig into the AI stuff here, what you can do, what it can't do, the way it deploys the AI, and things have been tweaked. But I'm not going to say there's been a vast amount of change, and I will go over it in a moment. But again, I strongly recommend that you check this out, because it goes into way more detail than I'm going to go now in this update. But if we look at right now going into the AI services, the TLDR is I think UGreen are still having difficulty deciding what kind of AI NAS they're going to have. And I know they've pretty much committed to most of it with the AI admin console, the Ulia smart intelligent kind of portal here, and the integration with other apps and services that we're going to go through in a moment. But the issue is to do with how and when scraping happens. And I reformatted the system in case there was any change in that. But what they're trying to do is give AI services, but not in an egregious way and not without it being under your control, because that was the largest bit of feedback they got. Now, what does that mean in real terms? Well, case in point, let's look at the universal search. Universal search here allows you to search the system on the fly in the background, and when you are searching, when you do go in, for example, if I look into docx, let's go for that. So I wanted to look for like a Word document or something. How and what the system has access to is what a universal search is for. You can say the extent of the search, how much system resources, and now whether you want to use AI for semantic indexing. And what that means is associated words. So look at the primary colours, red, blue, green, etc. But we know there is more to that. So in case of red, you can go with burgundy. If it's green, you can go for teal. There are, flavours of language, and that's where semantic search comes in. It finds word association beyond traditional just finding the same word. It goes for flowery surrounding language. That can be extended, by the way, to where you don't want it to search, which is really, really important, and how much of different applications and services use that. Now, a lot of that is to do with universal search on its own, but we need to get the grounding down there, because when you go into the AI console, this is where a lot of that change happens. So, for example, app authorization, you can choose which apps and services do have access. So for example, in the voice memo there, that's where you enable that voice to speech that I mentioned, and whether it's got access to that large language model. The local models, which ones you've got enabled, and the extent to which they can be used. Which apps and services are going to be utilizing Ulia, the AI service there. So again, whether it's in the theatre tools, whether it's in the photo management, the music management, and just generally within use in the system. Now, I will say you can utilize remote access AI services, tap in your API key for your ChatGPT, but who is actually going to do that? The whole point of this system is that you want to use local AI deployment. And the more keen-eyed of you may have noticed that you can choose whether you want to use AI services. And this is what I mean about the system stopping you, or at least at the gate, allowing you to be able to choose what it can access. But a lot of the time that can feel clunky when it's ad hoc. So for example, with the knowledge base, if you want to create a knowledge base, you go in, you create a knowledge base, and then from there you select the directory with which you're going to allow the knowledge base to have access. And then it will crawl that database. So for example, if I ask it to crawl that database there and I go, right, I want it to have these files to be used, from there it will allow it. But the extent to which it can be used is still pretty limited. So for example, I can't just enable the whole folder. I've got to go in and then select the file. So for example, all of those image files, I can add those to the database, and then that database is now going to be able to crawl it. You use that for the OCR. It will also crawl that database for the kind of image recognition there. And that's great. If you want, you can add more files. So again, if I wanted to go ahead and go for documents, if I wanted to go for some of the reviews, if there are files in here that are documents, that are PDFs. So for example, if we go back into the file manager, come out of that there, we found some documents. There we go. There's my Synology predictions article from a while ago. We've got that contextual element here for summarize and translation. So if we summarize that, it allows me to summarize the content of that document, which it's now going to use the AI to do. And bear in mind, I am using a decent amount of system resources right now indexing this system. But at the very least, it's allowing me to not only summarize that document, but on top of that, if we stop that transcript there, we go to a previous one. Here, for example, is a document about a Realtek processor. I can then ask the system questions about it. So what is this CPU for? It will then give me answers based on the context of what's in that document. But moreover, if I want, I can then enable access to online searches to use that external. Now, that's good. But as I say, going back into the document, the ability to create that knowledge base, let's cancel that doing its job, the ability to use that database, I want to be able to do more and a lot more conveniently. I want to be able to just drag and drop folders into this. I want to be able to scan and direct it towards folders, not individual files. But talking of models, I do think we have to highlight as well that the flexibility of models you can use right now, at least from a user-friendly user perspective, is still pretty limited. As you can see, we are using QN3, and there is an option if you choose to use GPT 4.1, the mini free tool. But again, because it's a cloud model, it does highlight the privacy element. But when you try to use other models, as you can see, you can use the API keys. Once you try to use the models at your disposal in here, this is really it right now. I wasn't able to access a model library. I couldn't find an easy way to just deploy the model that I want to use. And I get it, you're going to try to make this user-friendly, but I would have liked the ability to add customized models, or at least, stick a warning on it. Tell me, if you use a model, you may have unpredictable behavior, or you do this at your own risk, fine. And I get why having a model in place and therefore integrating it more fluidly in with apps and services makes a lot of sense. You already saw that example just now where we've got contextual right clicks there. So for example, if I go into tasks and docs here, I can go in there with the Ulia doc and translate it. And then that will translate it into another language. It's scanned for simplified Chinese by default, but I can select a different language. And again, a lot of that is whatever the last language that you chose to use was. But on top of that, it does cover PDFs. So if I go and search for a PDF within the system, it will allow me to run these same tools on a PDF, which is going to be great for summarizing information. Still, nonetheless, it does still mean, for example, if I want to use a movie file, so for example, if I want to use, let's go for MP4 here, or even better, rather than search for it, let's go in and find one of my media files there. MP4 files can't be used. So this is an MKV, for example, and there is no contextual option. If I want to use photo files, so let's go in and find in here, say there's a photo. Maybe I'd like to use Oulia to tell me what the contents of a photo is before I select it. So for example, let's go for this one here. There's a JPEG here. No Oulia option. So the extent to which you can integrate the use of Oulia there is limited. And by the way, that extends to spreadsheets. You can't right-click a spreadsheet and get it to give you the information. And that's disappointing, because that's something I'd like to see with this integrated AI. Continuing with Oulia here, one of the things I like, but I still think there's a little bit of ambiguity, is the fact that, again, with no online resources being used, I can run a question. You can see I've already ran a question here previously. What is a NAS? Now, that is only utilising information that's pre-built into the AI model, of which, again, there is a limit, a finite amount there, but also based on the information in the system. But I still don't see, for example, who is the as compares. Now, because of the crawling mechanic and the semantic search, for example, it's not really giving much to go on. Now, having a system that would pre-crawl would allow that to be a lot more intelligent there. Now, with the knowledge database, if I upload documents, scripts, PDFs, images, even media files into that knowledge base to allow me, and again, we went through this in way more detail in the other video, it would allow me to ask questions intelligently, but it still feels very ad hoc. It feels like me leading the horse rather than the horse leading me. And although it's still really good, and again, you can do it ad hoc with individual files, which some users are going to like. I know there are going to be users out there that like the fact that the AI stands down and the AI only works when you want it to. There are going to be other users that want the AI to be native, that want the AI to work straight out of the gate, and therefore indexing files natively. And they may have slightly different attitudes to security and trust, I get it, but I wish there was at least a doorway policy where I could tell the system, index every bloody thing that goes on this system immediately, rather than the ad hoc method that's being presented here that I think will please 5 out of 10 people. A lot of this also extends to the smart controls, because although they've seemingly been tweaked and I think the responses are a little better, I will say, and I know I've already done this search early on that you can see on the side there, but for example, asking the system what the IP is, that shouldn't be too complicated. It gives me that information and that's fantastic, but that took, what, 3 to 4 seconds? That should be pretty straightforward. It's nice to have, and I know a lot of you are just going to look at the URL bar, but if you're accessing it remotely, users on the system, the level of complexity of the questions you can ask is still not great. I like the fact, for example, I can increase or decrease the fan speed. I can change a lot of the LCD there, for example. Let's go for create a shared folder. It will give you direction on how to do stuff and give you links, but not fantastic. So, for example, what are you doing? What operating system you're using on a shared folder? Contextually, that should be obvious that I'm trying to create a shared folder on the NAS. So as you can see, it's asking those questions, but what I want is a link that immediately takes me to the ability to create a shared folder. I want it to open up the file manager. I want it to, from there, immediately click the plus and create a shared folder. Now, it can do that sometimes, but not all the time. And I do think the NAS control method for complete novices, and definitely those that are spending a lot of money to get a seamless transition from cloud to local storage, are going to like having smart commands rather than digging around. And I do think there's a lot of potential for smart commands that aren't being realized here, because you can see it does have the ability there to give those contextual options and direct you to things. So for example, how do I create a new user on this NAS? Now that, to me, is a bloody obvious question. Firstly, it's doing that AI thing of great question of positive reinforcement. So now, as you can see, it's telling me how to create a new user on my network attached storage device. Now, obviously the context of this conversation has been framed by my original question, but still, that should just give me information on this NAS. It shouldn't be giving me general direction based on archival information within the AI. Now, again, I'm sure it'll be improved, but it is still a service that I do think has huge potential that isn't being realized. A lot of the examples they always show you is if I go, show me pictures. Also, I think there needs to be better integration into how users can open up access to things. Because again, if anything, they're playing it incredibly secure and restrictive and modular, which is great in terms of the AI deployment, of course. But there are just going to be users that are going to find it a bit clunky. For example, no one's really going to put show me pictures of cats. I get that. But the reason I bring it up is, for example, it's saying, right, I've said show me pictures of cats. It's saying I can't show you directly. But if it should present something like, do you want to access the content of this NAS? And obviously if I click online search, that'll be a completely different story because it then will find information online. Whereas if I go into the photo application, of course, that is where a lot of that modularity of the photo management and just searching in general. However, using the photo application, of course, will bring that a lot quicker had I had the indexing completed in advance there for this video. Apologies for that. But the fact still remains, I do think, again, all of the building blocks are there, and UGreen have shown that, now I'll come right around to that in a moment, that they do commit to these products, as they did in the software updates, what they've done so far. So I like what I'm seeing. I do think the potential is still there, but I do think people have to set their expectations to a system that will still feel out the gate to be very barred off, and don't think as soon as you get this you're going to be able to hit the ground running with the AI. There is still tweaks, there's still access rights, and there's still a lot more modularity of the access that you're going to have to tweak on day one. Now, the reason I mentioned updates earlier on is, again, this is running on the AI assisted version of UGOS, their NAS operating system. There's also a bank of different applications and services you can run on different devices. There's also apps and apps that you can download directly from their download section, and then on top of that, all of their stuff that you've seen so far allows you to keep the system purely offline, with all apps being downloaded locally in their latest version if you choose to. Also, if you want to scale up the usage of the AI, and there's still no talk of true generative AI use, where you could, generate an image, generate a photo. I've got mixed feelings about that. I'm sure you do too. But you can use a GPU card inside the PCIe slot there and integrate it with the AI services to really bump up what you're doing there. And then from there, you can go ahead and utilize the driver locally if you choose to. But interestingly, again, as mentioned with the updates, they're pretty regular. There's been an update largely every month since the first release of the UGreen system. Right now, I still can't access the release notes on the IDX Pro 6100. So the client apps are all there as you would expect. And again, the client apps, as mentioned, are pretty darn good, but I don't have access to the release notes in the same way. Now, perhaps there's a release notes section where it goes into more detail, but at the very least, I hope they get that up and running ASAP to show what is being added over time as the years go on. Overall, the software's not changed a vast amount since the previous videos from shy of 2 months ago. I still like what's here. I like what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to please too many parties by keeping it as restrained and ad hoc, and when the user specifically requests it as possible. But I do think that is going to be to their detriment for users that are looking for a true comparative AI experience, that for users that have only ever used the likes of ChatGPT, only ever used the likes of online services there, which always feel a lot more streamlined overall. But the level of control here is still pretty darn good. The level of modulation is still pretty darn good. And I think for users that are looking for a local AI that they know is under their fingertips, doing what they want it to do ad hoc, it's going to be interesting. But just be aware it's not the same as utilizing ChatGPT at this point. we need to talk about that deposit scheme, because although now the campaign's up and running, and I think the percentage of users affected by this in the grander pool of people that are almost certainly going to buy this now at crowdfunding and at traditional retail, it's going to be a very small number. Much like the original NAS Sync campaign from a couple of years ago, we need to talk about it, just if anything to keep it in our memories for other campaigns, but also how UGreen could have done this a lot better. For those that aren't aware, this device has actually been talked about by UGreen at different trade shows for the better part of 2 years, but it's more than that, because they actually had a deposit scheme in place for several months prior to the launch of this device. And in that deposit scheme, you could go ahead and pay a $30 deposit, and it guaranteed you several things. Number one, it guaranteed you having access to the lowest possible price. We talked about it in the previous videos, but on top of that, it also allowed users, according to that page, to get access to the system's purchase links early. They were going to get emailed a direct link via the email address that they registered with the deposit, and that would allow them to get that lowest price, but also get first dibs on the device. Now, this became ever more important as the launch of the device got closer, when UGreen were kind of talking about online that there was going to be less units than they thought. A lot of that, let's be realistic, I don't know how much they spelled out to users, but let's take an educated guess. SSD prices, RAM prices, the works. Ultimately meaning there was almost certainly going to be fewer units rolling out on that day. So those that went for the deposit scheme, number one, probably felt a lot better that they went for it, and two, it might have even drummed up even more users taking the deposit scheme. But the deposit scheme was taken offline. And fast forward to the week before launch, so looking at my notes, the week of the 16th of March, a lot of these deposit paying backers received communication from UGreen of a little change of the status quo. Number one, there wasn't going to be a private link. Users were going to have to, and I'm sure that is how it's played out now at the time of recording, users had to go in with the public pool when their program goes live and allow those users access to purchasing the device like everybody else. But moreover, they would have to pay the same price as everyone else. The inherent two advantages, at least on the face of it, that early access backers paid for in that deposit scheme was not going to be afforded to them. Now, in UGreen's defense, they have stated and made it clear that those users are going to receive a refund as long as they make that purchase via Kickstarter, via the link, via the email address that they registered the deposit scheme with. A refund will come down the line. But for some users, that's not enough. Number one, some users that are going to use credit cards to purchase this device, they might not have the additional bunts on that credit card limit to make that purchase, especially at the top end, by the way, when you look at just how fat that discount was. Secondly, users not having access to the first batch, or at least a little reserved area before it goes public, or in any way just guaranteeing them a unit and having to fight it out with other users, especially when UGreen has stated that there are less units than they hoped, is really, really disappointing. And a lot of users are just absolutely furious that paying a $30 deposit and the potential of overpaying more than they anticipated when the crowdfunding goes live, and therefore taking that money out of their bank accounts and then into UGreen's hand, albeit it sounds temporarily, because I don't have any reason to doubt UGreen on that refund. But again, there doesn't seem to be a T&C legislative process in place to guarantee that, and that's that word again. It has certainly ruffled a lot of feathers. Now, UGreen has responded to individual users and the mods over on the UGreen Reddit in order to talk to other users as well about the reasons for this. Again, shout out to Topinga. I'm really sorry to read the names off camera on script here, but there's a lot of names. Topinga or Dracu and Clivey1962. Some of you might be the same thing via email and Reddit as well as suggestions by Altruise2 and the Great Dalmingo. Solid name, by the way. Users like these were posting suggestions of alternative ways this could have been approached, but also mods from the Reddit community who were talking with UGreen directly to try and get this ironed out. Now, UGreen state, for several reasons. One, the Kickstarter backend infrastructure did not allow for a complex operation like this to be conducted, where they would be able to hand select individual users without that going into the database, as I understand it, in the first place. Effective supply chain queuing, they are saying, was just not possible, at the very least not possible at this short notice. We'll come back around to that in a moment. Actually allowing for those users and the deposit scheme to ensure they get their units at that price straight out the gate. But some users have pointed out that Kickstarter does have systems of creating hidden or exclusive rewards to individual users, and maybe this is something that UGreen should have pursued, or perhaps promo codes. Ultimately, a lot of users were asking for the launch of the AI NAS to be delayed to accommodate for this. Now, UGreen, whether it is that they've got allocated units in place, or the fact that they've already had this system being shown off for trade shows for quite a long time and are looking for an ROI on this, they're not delaying that launch. Now, again, allocating stock to those deposit paying users would almost certainly be the most desirable way to do this. And other users have highlighted that had UGreen gone down this road and removed those deposit holders from the pool, there's a chance UGreen may not have wanted to consider this option, because then that would have removed backing users from the overall Kickstarter campaign, which would have ultimately took a lot of backed users out of the total list, and therefore could have harmed the marketing potential of having a much more successful campaign being marketed there. Again, the deposit holding system almost certainly wasn't just about getting bums on seats, but it was also about having a decent body of users early doors. They were going to take the hit, which presumably they still are if they refund to deposit backers, but take a hit on those early users to drum up a bigger buzz. And ultimately, this whole thing stinks of just bad planning rather than ill intent. Now, everything that's happened in the last week is bordering on corpo speak. It's bordering on potential ill intent, as these deposit holders are certainly really, really annoyed. But realistically, and the sad thing is, this is much like the original NAS sync campaign. This is going to be an element of this campaign that's going to be lost to the seas of time, because the number of users affected, I believe, is going to be far outweighed by the number of users that are just purchasing on day one. Also, we don't know how many units UGreen have actually got ready to rock for this campaign. No doubt there'll be more down the line, but given these devices use LP RAM, and RAM is a sodding rare commodity and an expensive one, I can't really see how many units they're going to have ready with the large quantity of RAM some of these systems are arriving with, 32 and 64 gig. Bottom line, if you ask me about the product itself, it's as solid as a rock. Do I think they're going to deliver on this? I think they are. Is it going to do what they say it does? I think it will. I think all of the promises that UGreen have made about this system are real. I think the pricing for it, even not that early deposit system and the later pricing that came later on, when you look at the price of hardware, when you look at the price of RAM, it actually makes a lot of sense. And for those that are looking at easy deployable AI services, this may be quite desirable. But I do think we can't ignore the simple fact that, one, this AI Ulia is not quite finished yet. Again, this is a crowdfunding product, but I want to see where they go with this and how much they are going to allow users, to allow Ulia to have a broader and wider access to the system, securely and safely, of course, to the rest of the data. The on-off switch is there. And I would argue, as a hardware release, sans AI services, this thing is a frigging behemoth. But I think that whole deposit thing is leaving a lot of bad taste. And although it would have been very easy for UGreen to just, give people early access links and take these people out of the crowdfunding pool, I think that would have undermined the whole reason, at least from their point of view, why they engaged with it in the first place. Do I agree with that? No. I think they should have honoured all of those deposits in the cleanest way possible. But if you were to ask me about the product in of itself, this thing is solid. I just wish they handled this crowdfunding better. Now, if you are interested in this device and you want to learn more, we're going to be talking more about this later on in the campaign, but also weighing up against some of the other AI competition out there for local deployments. We already did so with one of their competitors about a month ago, and we've got a couple more on the background there. If you are interested in getting hold of one of these, please use the link in the description in order to do so. This video is not made with UGreen's intervention. It's not made with UGreen's control. It is my video, my words, and my and Eddie's thought on this device here at NAS Compares. But if you're going to back this campaign, we get a commission for every time you use the link in the description. So using that link will allow us to keep doing what we do. It's a great way for you to support creators passively at no additional cost to yourself. But remember, crowdfunding, not traditional retail on this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.